This is Tim Staten with Tim Stating the Obvious. What is this podcast about? It's simple. You are entitled to great leadership everywhere you go, whether it's to church, whether it's to work, whether it's at your house, you are entitled to great leadership. And so in this podcast, we take leadership principles and theories and turn them into everyday, relatable, and usable advice.
And a quick disclaimer. This show, process, or service by trademark manufacturer, or otherwise does not necessarily constitute an implied endorsement of anyone that I employed by or favors them in representation. The views are expressed here in my show are my own expressed and do not necessarily state or reflect those of any employer.
Hey, Russell, so I really appreciate you being on the show this year, and I just kind of want to set the stage for everybody as they come in and they take a listen to this one. So this is going to be the first episode of a 4-part miniseries that we're going to collaborate on. And you're a life coach and you're a leadership coach, and I believe that leaders need coaches. I'm a firm believer of that. If you play a specific sport, you definitely need a coach. Even surgeons have coaches on how to do things more efficiently and better. So it's really great to get your perspective and your expertise in what you do. And I believe that the listeners who are going to tune into this and listen to the show, they're going to get a lot of benefit from you and your expertise, what you have. And so kind of what we're going to be doing over the next couple episodes is we're going to be talking about different topics. And then we're going to be providing different tools and ways to overcome a challenge. Really, I kind of want to hear from you. How do you overcome those challenges, and was it beneficial for you? Were those topics that we talked about beneficial, and were those tools beneficial, and how did we do that? Russell, one, if you could just kind of give me a brief background about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thanks, and thank you for having me on my show, Timothy. So, I'm a leadership coach. I have been for 12 or 13 years. I'm a master certified coach, which is the highest certification of coaching that's offered by the International Coaching Federation. And I work with many different kinds of people, but I tend to focus on leaders. And it's interesting how I got here. So I lived most of my life in Alaska, and I was executive director of nonprofits there, mostly environmental groups, mostly high advocacy groups. And what I noticed was that the limiting factor in what my group could do or what my organization can do was not lack of resources, not the bad guys, not the circumstances, but it was the leadership. It was me. I was the limiting factor that kept the group back, or if not kept the group back, didn't have the group go as far as it could. And there were a lot of leadership programs. I mean, you just Google leadership coaching or leadership skills, and you'll get hundreds and hundreds of programs that will offer skills to leaders. But what I knew was that it wasn't a skill that I needed, right? I'm a smart guy. I could pick up leadership for dummies and learn all kinds of leadership skills. Essentially, leadership or good leader it depends on your character and your being, your behavior, who you are as a person, and not the skills that you might have. And a classic example of that is you could be a master of rhetoric, but if you're nervous on the stage, your speech isn't going to go well. So you could have the skill of being a good speaker, but if you don't have the being of being a good speaker, you'll flop. And it was that being, or the leadership being, if you will, that I needed to develop. And so in 2010, I left Alaska and moved to New York City because I wanted to dig into a leadership coaching program where I was the coachee. I wanted to develop myself so I could go back to Alaska and be a better leader. And I learned a lot about leadership. I learned a lot about coaching, and I learned a lot about me in that process, but it was ultimately successful. I am a very different person today than I was back then. And because I couldn't find work while I was in New York City, I was there for 5 years, I needed to go into work myself, to be self-employed, if you will. And what I knew at that point was leadership coaching. And so that's how I became a leadership coach.
No, that's pretty awesome. How you mentioned, you were seeking your own self-improvement and you sought out to be a coachee, and then you turned out to be a coach yourself. So can you kind of walk me through what was it like seeking out a coaching program? So you said you were in Alaska and you had to actually move to New York City in order to seek out this program. Is it because there were no programs in Alaska, or was New York the best place to get this coaching?
Well, both and all. And there were no leadership programs that were working on developing you as a leader as opposed to skill-based leadership programs and, in Alaska. And I don't know how many there are in the country. I didn't really look that hard. But there's also true, I lived in a cabin back in the wilderness in Alaska. I was ready to live in a big city. I wanted a new adventure. So I perhaps could have gone to San Francisco or Seattle, but I wanted a city with lots of frenzy, and where else can you go but New York City? So it was a combination.
So what was it like, and what was the process that you went to select a coaching program? So as many people are listening to this and they're like, you know what, I think I should benefit from a leadership coach. What do you look for when seeking out a coach?
Yeah, good question. So there are two different things. One is I went into a regular program. I didn't have an individual coach. So I'm an individual coach and people hire me and we work one-on-one, but I was more in a classroom kind of situation. Here's my, I'll get too deep into my theory so quickly, but essentially to be an effective leader, you need to be able to take risks. And by risks, I mean you need to be vulnerable. You need to be able to expose yourself. You need to be able take a risk. I mean, that takes courage, and it takes a real knowledge of what it is you need to risk in order to move forward. And when I went into that program, right, that's what it did. It taught me to be vulnerable. It taught me courage so I could move forward. So let me just give you an example to make it a little more concrete. One of the skills I learned in one of the leadership trainings that I went to when I was still in Alaska taught me about staff management plans. Oh, that sounds really great. I don't know what the staff doing. A lot of nonprofits are a little bit like kiddie soccer. Everybody's chasing the ball, no one's holding position. So I thought having a staff management position plans for all my staff, we could figure out where they're going, what our priorities were, what people were accomplishing every week. So I put those into action in the program. But what I could not do is hold people accountable. So if I had a staff member said that they were going to do X by next Friday, and if they hadn't done X, I'd say, oh, okay, let's do X next week. So the consequence was that things didn't get done. And what was missing for me was being able to say, hey, listen, Joe, you said you did X, you didn't do X. What do we need to do? What was the breakdown? What do we need to do in place so that you do X next time? All right. How to hold them accountable. But what I was afraid of, and this is the risk, coming back to the risk, I was afraid of conflict. I didn't want to have a fight with Joe. And I was afraid that Joe wouldn't like me, right? That if I held his feet to the fire, that he completes what he committed to completing, that he wouldn't like me. So in both of those situations, I was unwilling to take risk. And as a leader or as a manager, if that is a concern of yours, and it is with most of the people I work with, you're going to be less effective.
Accountability is a huge part of leadership, and definitely, like you said, risk management. So you say this is a common theme, being able to take risk and being vulnerable, being able to, have the courage to have that healthy conflict. Because I think conflict is healthy in the workplace as long as it's healthy. I guess the question is you mentioned, you were afraid of conflict and being liked. So I think there's a big difference between likership and leadership. And I know we're kind of going off topic a little bit here, but still on what is a leader versus a manager. But when we talk about leadership versus likership and being able to bolster that accountability piece and hold people accountable, what did you find in your growing process to be the best catalyst to get over that?
Yeah. So several things. One is you need to make distinctions. You need to be aware of what's going on. So somebody could say, let's just say, the key purpose of a leader, for instance, is to say, this is where we need to go. That goal is important and we need to get there. So that's the essence of leadership. And if you stand up and say, that's where we need to go, you're putting yourself at risk because other people will say, no, it's not. They'll cut you down. You look at any leader in the political stream, in the political world, right, they get criticized constantly. So it takes a lot of courage to be a leader. So the first thing you need to do is distinguish what you're afraid of. If it's just an amorphous fear, right, you won't be able to deal with it. You won't be able to manage it. So the first thing is to distinguish what is it that you're afraid of, right? 2 is then understanding or making the choice of whether you're going to do what you need to do regardless of the risk involved, or you're going to say no to the risk. Okay. So it's essentially you're putting yourself a choice. Am I going to do this even though the risks involved, risk of criticism, rejection of people walking away from me, or am I going to sit home and not do it? So there's a choice after you've made that distinction. Then there are a number of tools, and we'll talk about it in the next 3 episodes, the tools that will support you if you do decide to become the leader, if you do decide to say, hey, this is where we need to go, and I want you to come with me. We'll look at a number of different tools to make that easier. And then the 4th is practice. You just got to get up there and do it, and you fall down and get all bloody, but you pick yourself up and enter the fray again. So it's practice. So those would be my 4 key steps.
Okay, no, that's really great advice. And I kind of want to go back to what you said at the beginning, and it kind of harkens to Sun Tzu, know yourself, right? When he says, you got to know your enemy, but you also got to know yourself. And you mentioned about your character, your being, your behavior, that be, know, do type of leadership. So we talked about the leadership aspect of it, but what about a manager? Because I think often people get those two confused.
They do, and they're both really important functions, and they're both very different. So a leader, as I said, points to the horizon and says, that's where we need to go. This is why it's important. This is who's coming with me. Let's get in action. A manager, on the other hand, says, all right, we've got this process that we need to do. How can we do it most efficiently? We need to turn inputs into outputs. How do we do it most efficiently? Totally different personality styles, totally different behavioral characteristics, and totally different skill sets. Right? Both are essential. If you have a leadership and bad management, then you have checks bouncing and appointments being missed and total chaos. And if you have management without leadership, you might be doing things right, but you might be going in the wrong direction. Right? You might not be going where you need to go. So the little ditty around leadership and management is managers do things right. Leaders do the right thing.
It's really good about that part right there, because I think vision's very important moving forward. And I think it's also very important to have that grit and that stick-to-itiveness when you make a hard choice and going in that right direction and doing the right thing. And you mentioned about the quality of your leadership, that it depends on who you are. I'm a big believer in that as well. I guess my question on that is, we all come from different upbringings. We all come from different backgrounds in life. You used to live in Alaska. I used to live in North Carolina. So we all have different ways that we see the world. Mm-hmm. How is it that we can kind of come to a common understanding about quality of leadership? And what does it really mean, the quality of leadership?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there are 2 questions there. What's the quality of leadership, and how, with all our different backgrounds, can we become leaders? So taking the first question first, you can see leaders throughout any culture, any group, any ideology, or any goal. And every individual, too, is going to be unique. So leadership can be unique. It shares common attributes, like the vision, for instance, the ability to inspire people in where you're going, right? And the ability to get people into action. Those are the key attributes, regardless of what individual characteristics or qualities you bring to it. There's also, within leadership, there are different leadership styles. There's the visionary style, but there's also the coaching style. The coaching style is where you're developing the people, developing your followers. Or there's the democratic style of leadership where you only move forward when you have consensus. And then there's the command and control style, which you might see in the military. Hey, buddy, we're going here and you don't have a say in it. So there are all different styles of leadership that work better in some situations and less so in other situations. And a good leader can pick the style that is necessary for the particular circumstances. And then the quality of leadership, the quality depends. You can evaluate the quality on the results you get. Are you getting where you want to go? Are you achieving your vision? Are people flocking to your cause, or are they disappearing? Are they running away? So ultimately, the quality of leadership is determined by the results that the leader produces.
Yeah, I think results are huge because if you're not getting results, then what are we doing here, right? No matter what it is, I know everything is results driven, but I guess I would say even with those results, let's say someone's been in a leadership position for 15 years and they're like, you know what, I'm getting results, but they still feel like they're still lacking. So how do we evaluate the results?
So you said the results are still lacking. How do we evaluate the results? You mean how do we evaluate the leadership there?
Well, let's say someone's in a leadership position and they've been in leadership positions for 15 years, different organizations, it doesn't matter what it is, and they still get results, right? They still get the results that they're looking for. But let's say, themselves, they feel like maybe the results aren't as good as they could be. How do they then evaluate the results?
So if the results aren't as good as they could be, they've already been evaluated. Is your question, how do you improve your leadership so you get better results?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the answer is easy. Hire a leadership coach. And I'm being a little facetious there, but not entirely, because one of the things that, if somebody's been in the leader for 15 years, gets a certain amount of results, but wants to get better results to move faster or higher or take on a bigger project, it really helps to work with someone who can stand outside of you, right? And look at how you're looking at your leadership. Because how a person relates to their leadership or to themselves as well, right, determines a substantial part the results they're getting. So it really helps to have someone outside of you and then someone who's trained to look at, right, what behaviors are you deploying here that are working in service of your leadership and what behaviors are working against.
That's a great point that you bring up. So even if you've been in a leadership position for a long time, it's always good to have somebody outside to come and evaluate what you're doing and how you're doing it and how to get better to improve your results. Now, what about somebody who is at the very beginning, who is just starting out into leadership? I also would say that they would need a leadership coach, but what are some of the common issues or themes that you see with new young leaders?
Yeah, well, there are a couple thoughts there. One of my most common type of client, people who come to hire me, are people that at one point were in what we call individual contributor. They're down in the trenches doing the work, right? They may have been a programmer or IT guy behind his computer, and he did it really, really well. So his supervisor says, hey, let's make you team lead. We've got this project over here. So all of a sudden he's hauled out of the trenches and now he has to lead a bunch of other programmers or technical people, right? Engineers or whomever. And that's where the trouble starts. And here I'm using, this is less of a leader and more of a manager, because that's usually the route. We start out as managers and we move into leadership. But the number one concern is that in the past, they were comfortable producing results on their own. Now they have to produce results through other people, right? So the team lead is not there behind the computer cranking out code or doing engineering. They have 5 or 6 other guys, other people who are doing the code. And it's scary. One, it's scary because you're really good. That's why you got pointed to the position. And likely the 4 or 5 guys who are not working for you are not as good as you. So the consequence is that you get in there and do the work. Or the consequence is you get really angry at these people for not doing the same quality work that you expect, right? And if their self-image was tied to their competence, which is really often the case, and the team starts collapsing and the manager isn't actually doing the work, then their whole self-confidence and self-image starts collapsing. And that's usually when they pick up the phone and call me. So those are the two things, is being able to make that transition from individual contributor to managing the results through other people, and managing their own self-assessment, right? Because now their self-assessment isn't tied to how many lines of code they write or what kind of engineering designs they come up with, but how the team produces. Did that make sense?
No, that does make sense. And that's a huge transition to make. I don't think very many people understand how important and how huge of a leap that is from going to an individual contributor to then managing the results through other people. And then that's how you get evaluated and judged, through the results of everyone that you're leading through, and how that's so tied to you as an individual too, right? So like if you're a high performing individual contributor, then you go to a leadership position, and like you said, your team isn't producing the same high results that you would have produced, but you're being judged by them, and how that could have that mental effect. I completely agree with you. That's a huge transition for people to make. And I don't think people necessarily understand how huge that is and how hard of a transition that is.
Yeah. And Timothy, here's the deal. When he was an individual contributor, I'm just picking up programmers because I used to be a programmer. You went to school and you got a degree in computer science, but when they put you in the team lead position, you get absolutely zero training, absolutely zero. And that's why there's so many bad managers and messed up teams around.
No, I agree. That's the whole reason why I created this show, is because I started noticing that there is a significant lack of leader development. And I know people talk about it in various organizations, but when you really look at it, you're going to take a person that has technical hard training, right? You got skills training, you got hard skills training, but they don't really get the soft skills training. And then they're just put in a position like, go ahead and perform. And it's kind of trial and error and failure, and then repeat and rinse until you succeed. And then the stress that you, right, or not. And then the people that work with you and work for you, the stress, the amount of undue stress that you put on them because you're trying to figure stuff out. So that's really why I created this show, is so I want people to be able to take away real tangible items and tools that they can implement themselves so they can become better leaders. And so that also people don't have to suffer with you in the workplace.
Or not. And I love that, suffer with you, because I can't tell you how many times I and how many people I know have suffered bad managers, and they're bad managers just, they have, not because they're bad people, but they just haven't been trained. And again, the training isn't just skills; it's also your being, your behaviors.
So can we expand upon that real quick? When you said your being and your behaviors, so I think that's really critical, because when we talk about character, I don't think that people really understand what character is. I know, let's say 30, 40, 50 years ago, character was more of an understood word. People knew what character was. Now, not so much. And that's evident through behaviors and society if you take a look at it. So let's talk about what character really is and how your character translates to your behaviors.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I want to be clear, to a certain extent, the word character doesn't quite encompass what I'm saying when I'm talking about your being or your kind of inner self. As important as it is, and if I could just give an example, you mentioned that, I guess we both mentioned that, somebody's moved into a managerial position after being an individual contributor. Excuse me. If their sense of self-worth is tied up with how many lines of code they produce, and all of a sudden they're a manager and not producing any lines of code, then they can go into a real depression. They can be really undercut by that. So I include that, maybe not, that doesn't fall under the definition of character, but it definitely falls under my definition of being, who you are. We have to have our self-worth tied to something. And if that something is taken away from us, that can have severe consequences that will impact our managerial or leadership ability. That said, character, which we often think of in terms of like integrity or, how we, how we show up in the world, you're right. We don't have the same kind of cultural guidelines to train us as we grow up that we once did, and a lot of times it was tied to religion and some kind of ethical practice, and a lot of that has been undercut. But the key thing is you can't be a good leader unless you develop trust. People have to trust you, and you have to have a trusting culture. Without that, it just comes apart. And the first thing that people look at is your character in terms of trust. Do you do what you say you're going to do? Right? Do you keep your word? Do you, when somebody else tells you something in confidence, do you keep that in confidence? Right? So there are a lot of different ways of developing trust, and that's all tied to your character.
No, absolutely. That's a huge piece right there. We have to have trust no matter what you do. It's a foundation of human beings, on a relationship level, and then on, team building and organizational level. And that just transcends through everything. So yes, absolutely. But you mentioned the self-worth piece and how that's tied to that. And I'm just going to share this real quick. So, I'd been in a specific career field for about 20 years now. And it's been a huge struggle of me to kind of figure out, okay, who am I as a person, as a leader, not in this career field anymore. And the show's been a great outlet for that as well. But you're right. If what you're tied to and what you develop your self-worth as changes, and you don't know how to deal with that could definitely lead to a huge amount of depression. So again, I would also offer up to everybody that if you haven't thought about a leadership coach, this is a great way to help implement that, so that way you can develop all your skills and kind of work through your mental stuff as well. So let's talk about imposter syndrome real quick, because I believe we talked about new leadership. We talked about people coming in. We've talked about people who've been in for a long time. What have you seen with imposter syndrome? Because I think a lot of people may have this self-doubt of, I'm starting something new and I don't know what this is.
So it's funny because imposter syndrome has kind of taken the world by storm. It's like everybody has imposter syndrome. And here's the truth. Yeah, you're an imposter. You're not 100% competent in anything you do unless you've lowered the stakes so much that it's hardly worth getting out of bed, right? And really, you want to be in a position that's going to challenge you and grow you and learn teach you new things. So in that respect, right, none of us are really prepared for the job. I actually loved a quote. I'm going to mangle it. And it was some parenting advice. And it's essentially, no one is ready to be a parent. I don't care how many books you read about parenting. When that baby finally arrives in your arms, and particularly if it's your first one, you're a bloody imposter. But it seems to have worked okay. We've got, carried forward the human race. So the point isn't that it's that you don't. Not that you don't belong in this position because you're the wrong person or you're not competent. That's true, but so what? See it as a challenge, not as something that's going to subvert you. And again, coming back to taking risks, the risk here is to say, you know what? This is part of my job description and I don't have a clue how to do it. I'm going to get some help. I'm going to get some support. I'll talk to my boss about training programs or something. So that's, again, taking a risk. And the imposter syndrome feeds on you, or it becomes corrosive when you're unwilling to take those risks, when you're unwilling to be authentic with what you can do and can't do. So again, your step towards leadership here, your step towards power is being willing to be exposed, to take a risk.
Absolutely. And I think one key thing that you mentioned there, right, with imposter syndrome taking the world, people feel like, oh, they're the imposter. Well, and you're right. Like you said with the parenting thing, I fully, one is being a stepdad, and then I had my own kids, right? So I had one that, showed up, and all of a sudden now I've got to figure that out. And then I had my own, which were, babies. I definitely didn't know what I was doing when they were babies, but definitely had to figure that part out. And, everybody's turned out okay. So I agree with you that, I don't know why imposter syndrome is becoming a thing or why it's become corrosive, other than seeing things as a challenge That's just me personally. And I thought it was interesting because I started seeing really probably like the last 6 to 8 months, a lot more imposter syndrome type trends and topics about how people feel inferior or less than because they haven't been in positions before. And I would offer up to people that you need to get comfortable being uncomfortable because that's where you grow. And I've said that, several times, and I fully believe that because if you're in a position where you're always comfortable, then you're not going to take the risk, and then you're not going to grow. And then, that impacts your leadership as well. But I know that's hard to do, to challenge yourself, right? So how hard is it for personal development and leadership development?
Yeah. And I mean, you've nailed it. And one of our episodes following this one will be specifically on that issue, is you can't move forward unless you're willing to be uncomfortable, which usually raises a lot of fear and anxiety in people. So how do you manage the fear and anxiety? How do you step beyond it, right? And how do you willingly take those risks? Because I'll tell you that when you're taking risks, within a level, right? Jumping out of a plane without a parachute's a risk, but it's probably going to have bad outcomes. But, taking a risk that for you is a risk, right? Charges you up, gives meaning to your life, gets you excited, and gets you out of bed in the morning. And a lot of the people that hire me come to me, they're super high-performing professionals, and they say, I am bored. And if you look deeply into their life, I'm bored and I'm unfulfilled. It's because they're not taking risks. They're so comfortable, right, in their centrally heated homes and Gore-Tex, whatever. They're so comfortable that, of course, they're bored. But to answer your question, how do you get somebody to take risks? You can't get anybody to take a risk, but you can do is encourage them and support them in taking the risk. There is, and Timothy, I got to say, this is one of my favorite YouTube or TED Talks up there by a Chinese American, and I'm gonna butcher his name. It's like Jia Zhang, and this poor guy felt rejected all his life, and because he was so afraid of being rejected, that he just closed down. He became a bloody clam. So his life was miserable. And he decided one day that he was going to have 100 days, and every day he was going to get rejected. And this is what his TED Talk is about, is those 100 days of being rejected. So he'd be rejected. Like he'd ask the bus driver if he could drive the bus. He asked he go to a Starbucks and he asked if he could be a greeter like they have in Walmart. He would ask things where he would get a no. And he just practiced. He just practiced until he was comfortable being rejected. Because somebody says no to you, it doesn't mean anything about you. It's just a no.
No, yeah. And I actually watched that same TED Talk, and I thought it was really amazing how he was like, I am purposely going to get rejected. And, and I thought also too, what was really powerful about that was how he went on to talk about how he actually found in some things that he thought that he would be immediately rejected on, he wasn't. And I don't know if you remember that part of that talk. And it really taught him that really, if I don't even ask, I'm eliminating myself and rejecting myself before somebody else can reject me. And that was a big eye opener for me of what I took away from that is he was like, I'm going to be purposely rejectful on stuff and get rejected. And then he found out I really wasn't as rejected as much as I thought I would be.
Yeah, and that's a great example of how we subvert our own leadership. Is we assume the response we're going to get, therefore we don't try. We assume that we know what response you're going to get, and then we don't try. You might as well just shoot yourself in the head then. Again, it's coming back to taking risks and noticing how we develop. This isn't something I thought we'd talk about, but it's key is we develop what I call control patterns or ways of managing ourselves so that we don't feel uncomfortable. And one of those control patterns is assuming that you know what somebody else is going to say to you or do in response to a request of yours. And if we assume we know, we don't do it, that keeps us safe, keeps us feeling comfortable.
I think that's a great place to wrap this episode up with? If there's anything you want to add to this episode before we move on to the next one?
Yeah, I just had thoughts of just to explain what the next three are. So the first one is how to manage fear so you can tackle these big challenges. How do you become a greater risk taker? The second one is how to manage your feelings, right? So that you can produce the results you want. Our feelings often subvert us. They don't always work in our favor. And looking at them and being aware of them, being able to manage them, emotional intelligence is key to being an effective leader. And then the third one is how to generate power. We don't tend to think that our power, being powerful, is something that we do. We think it's given to us, all right? But how do you generate power so that you're powerful and effective regardless of circumstances? So those are the three things we'll be talking about in the next three episodes.
No, thank you for bringing that up. And I'm super excited about them for me personally as well. I think these are great topics to talk about. They're very relevant to everybody. And these are things that I have seen in comments on my own episodes and previous episodes as well. So I think they'll be highly value added for everybody out there. And I would like to ask everybody before we go that if you could comment, if you have a question that you want answered in relative to any of the next several episodes, go to timstatingtheobvious.com and send me an email with a question or a comment that you have on this episode or any future episode that you may want to have answered. And we'll go ahead and we'll get Russell to answer those. Or go to the YouTube page, Tim Stating the Obvious, on this episode and comment down below on this episode on any question or comment you have for Russell on anything pertaining to this episode or any episode moving forward. So that way we can answer your questions for you there. Hey, Russell, I really appreciate you taking the time and having this chat, and I look forward to the next couple episodes.
Alrighty. Well, thank you, Timothy, and I'm looking forward to them as well.
As always, thank you for stopping by and checking out this episode and listening to it. I really hope that you enjoyed it. Before we go, I'd like to ask a favor of you if I could. If you could please share this episode with one or two people who you think might like this topic. If you haven't followed or subscribed on the platform that you're listening to and hit all the bells and icons and all the whistles so that you know that when we post another episode, you'll be alerted, please go ahead and do all that before you go. If you got some value out of this episode, please leave a review or a comment so we can help spread the show to other people who might be interested in the topics that we've talked about here today, but may not have found our show yet. Again, thanks for stopping by. I'm Tim Staten, stating the obvious.